Many of the entries in Edit Mode's Vertex menu have been covered in previous videos. So, in this video, we will briefly go over the operation of these options and refer you back to the original videos in which they were covered. Extrude vertices, as we might guess, extrudes the selected vertices and can also be made available by pressing Alt-E. The last op panel allows us to specify the exact extrude distance along each axis and the axis set to which the distance refers. Mirror editing is only relevant when mirror editing is switched on. For example, if we switch on mirroring in the X direction, extruding a vertex on one corner of a cube extrudes the corresponding vertex on the other corner. However, whereas the original vertex extrudes to create a new edge, the mirrored vertex also extends the existing faces. This is probably a bug. Proportional editing, when selected, activates proportional editing, adjusting the position of vertices close to the selected ones. Proportional editing was covered in video 23. During the extrude process, the status bar has the usual options that we see when moving elements. For example, pressing an axis letter restricts the extrusion to that direction only, while pressing Shift and an axis letter forbids movement in that direction. Extrude to cursor or add will extrude any selected elements to the mouse pointer. For the first extrusion, all that is required is pressing the left mouse button. To add extra extrusions, press Ctrl and the right mouse button. The end position of the extrusion will be dependent on the viewpoint. If the two vertices at either end of an edge is selected initially, this option will extrude the edge, making a new face in the process. Selecting all the vertices of a face extrudes the face and adds new side faces as required. We can also use this option without an initial selection. In this case, pressing the left mouse button creates a single vertex, which, although part of the mesh, is not connected to it. The extrusion tool is covered in video 42. Bevel vertices bevels the area around the selected vertices. The characteristics of these bevels are set in the last op panel, which is the standard one used by the bevel tool. The bevel tool is covered in videos 44 and 45. New edge, face, from vertices will create a new edge between two selected vertices or a new face between three or more selected vertices. If two unconnected edges are selected, Blender can create the missing elements to produce a face. Blender can even create several faces where necessary, but watch out for it creating two faces over the same area. For example, in this grid, Blender creates separate faces for each cell, but also creates a single face covering the whole grid. Where possible, Blender can even create a new face when only one vertex is selected. If we select a set of joined faces, this option will reduce them to a single face, removing surplus vertices and edges. This is the same as the face dissolve option available when deleting elements. However, be careful not to use this option to try splitting a non-planar face. The resulting edge does not split the face. Connect vertex path. Using this option will join the selected vertices, creating a split in the face or faces that are crossed. This is the option to use when splitting non-planar faces. Notice that it will add several new edges if the selected vertices are in separate faces. When the selected vertices are around the same original face, the operation connects the vertices in the order they are selected. Connect vertex pairs. For most simple selections, we'll see no difference between this and the previous tool. However, when several vertices are selected from the same face, we get new edges between vertex pairs. Rip vertices is used to create a hole in the surface of a mesh. Rip vertices and fill is similar to rip vertices, but fills what would be the hole with a new face. Rip vertices and extend. This option is really a form of extrusion, but with the extension forming part of the original face, rather than the new face that conventional extrusion uses. The last op panel allows us to select the distance moved along each axis, the axes set involved, mirroring and proportional editing. The rip tools are discussed in detail in video 59. Slide vertices allows the selected vertex to be moved along any of the edges to which it is attached. For more details, watch video 54. Smooth vertices moves the selected vertices to create a rounding effect on the mesh. The last op panel uses smoothing to set the basic rounding effect and repeat to control how often the smoothing value is applied. Unchecking the X, Y, or Z boxes as required will stop rounding along that axis. Smooth vertices, Laplacian, performs the same rounding effect as the last operator, but using a slightly different algorithm when repositioning the vertices. We can see the effect produced when used on an open-topped cube. The last op panel uses a different set of parameters from those for smooth vertices. Number of iterations determines how often the algorithm is performed. Lambda factor is a parameter that affects the algorithm being used and hence the overall shape created. Lambda factor in border adjusts the effect around any border elements, in this case, around the top of the cube. X, Y, or Z boxes, when unchecked, stop the smoothing effect along that axis. Preserve volume ensures that the mesh occupies more or less the same volume as it changes shape. Before we discuss the second part of the Vertex menu, there are other topics we need to cover first, since these are relevant to some of those remaining Vertex menu options.